Hey, Dr. Robertson, what are we talking about today?
Who are you?
I
Why are you on my computer?
don't know. I just happen to show up every now and then.
Hey, Dr. Mosley. Today we're going to talk about aperitifs
Ooh,
and fortified wines.
all
I
right.
just like saying the word aperitif.
Yeah,
Sounds fancy.
it does. It does. And I like the sound of fortified wines. It sounds like something we would drink out on the front line, you know,
Yeah, it
fortified.
it pretty much is. And well, we'll get into it. There are two types of fortified wines, and we're going to be talking about the socially acceptable kind.
All right.
All right. So uh, there are lots and lots and lots of alcohols out there that don't quite fit in a category.
Hmm.
And like they're not exactly wines, they're not exactly spirits or whiskeys, or not beers. They're these alcoholic beverages, usually made through distillation, that have all sorts of things added to them and flavors, and so these usually fall into this aperitif or digestif um, mode. And the idea is that most of these are very old, very traditional. And these were things that you either took before a meal to stimulate your appetite
Hmm.
or after a meal to settle your stomach. And what you learn when you go back and look at history is you basically realize people were just looking for any excuse they had to drink more. It's like,
I mean,
well,
I got to have something to drink after the meal. I
yeah,
mean,
we've got a meal coming up. We should drink something to get our stomach primed.
we
And then
should.
while we're eating, we should have a wine with every course. And then when we're done, we need to drink something to settle our stomach.
I mean, how else is it supposed to handle all that wine that we had during the
Yeah.
meal?
So that's one of the takeaways from history, is that people were always just looking for another way to sneak another alcoholic beverage into their day. So the aperitifs are things you're supposed to drink before a meal that stimulate an appetite. And there's actually some truth to this. The alcohol, one of the things it does is it makes your mouth water. So, just when you consume alcohol, it makes your mouth water. And that is it's kind of Pavlovian, but that act of the mouth watering makes you feel hungry. It's like, oh, my mouth is watering, I must be hungry. So that's the idea behind that. The digestives were kind of the opposite. We're not going to talk about digestives much, but if anyone's ever had, what's the licorice flavored stuff?
I don't know, but I avoid anything licorice flavored.
You have the Sambuca. So traditional digestive Sambuca is it's real intense licorice flavored liqueur with 3 coffee beans in it. So you get the shot, you knock it back, you chew the coffee beans. It's supposed to help settle your stomach after a meal.
Huh.
So aperitifs tend to be sweet with a little bit of bitterness as an aftertaste. And they can be spirit-based, so they can be made with distilled spirits, or they can be wine-based. So things like Jägermeister and Campari, those are spirits. And then things like vermouth or port, those are wine-based.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of these. So bitters, if you've ever, seen it at a bar, you got a little bottle of bitters, use it in mixed drinks. Is 90 proof, and it's a distilled spirit that's got a bunch of different herbs and spices in it that have been extracted through steam extraction, which basically means the hot steam is used to liberate these volatile compounds from the herbs and spices, and then those are added to the spirits to give it its distinct flavor. About 90 proof. Campari is from Italy. It's about 48 proof. And again, it comes from various plants and roots and herbs and spices that are added to it. Jägermeister.
Yeah.
What?
I don't know. I mean, you have one bad night with anything, and that's just going to be the reaction that you give it for life.
All nights for the Jägermeister are bad nights.
You know what? I actually cannot, say you're wrong. I can't.
So, if you get to the point where you're having the Jägermeister, something is going wrong in your life.
Yeah. There's definitely something amiss.
Yeah.
So yes, so it's from Germany.
Yes, and it's actually not that strong. It's only 70 proof.
Yeah.
So relative to other things, it's not that strong. But it has 56 different fruits and herbs and botanicals in it to give it that distinctive medicinal flavor.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of work to make it taste like medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kir is an acidic white wine mixed with creme de cassis.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can also make spritzers, which are wine mixed with something sparkling like seltzer or ginger ale and served on ice. Now, actually, spritzers are a great way to use wine that's about to go bad. So if you've got wine, it's been open for 2 days, you haven't been able to sell it because you're selling wine by the glass, make spritzers, because the presence of the bubbles kind of cover up if the wine's getting a little close to the end. And, it's just an opportunity. It's another way to market it. Aperitifs tend to be cold, or room temperature. These aren't ones that are served warm. And if it's meant to be served cold, it's best to bring it straight from the fridge, not to serve it on ice. So actually, with your Jägermeister, keep it in the fridge, serve it cold. You don't pour it over ice.
Well, I got a few friends who are a little big into Jägermeister, and they actually have a dispenser that Jägermeister builds and sells, and it will pretty much freeze your booze. And
Okay.
It's interesting. I mean, there's definitely a following for it. So
we'll talk about one of the wine aperitifs is vermouth, and vermouth is famous because it's used to make martinis. And so this is an aromatic wine. So it's a mixture of wine with other herbs and spices added to it. And supposedly, it's very old. Supposedly, even it goes back to Hippocrates, who founded medicine, the Greek philosopher.
Well, I mean, he probably came up with this oath after drinking a bit of vermouth.
Yeah. So the ingredient flavor, whatever you want to call it, is in vermouth is wormwood. So the origin of the name vermouth is actually a bastardization of the German for vermouth, which is wormwood is a bastardization of the German word also. So wormwood is the main flavor compound in vermouth. It's also the one that's used. What's the one that is supposed to make you go crazy if you drink it?
Absinthe?
Yeah, absinthe. Wormwood is also present in absinthe. Now, it's kind of funny. Do you happen to know the Russian word for wormwood?
No, I do not, actually.
Chernobyl.
Really?
Yes.
Huh, that didn't age well.
Yeah. And also, in a lot of languages, it is it's the same word as the word for the devil. Yeah. So.
Well, I mean, after a night of absinthe, you're definitely danced with the devil.
Yeah.
So
it's wine that's then distilled and then blended. The herbs are ground up in it, and then it's just allowed to steep in it like tea. Then you stir it, you cool it. It just got a lot of flavors and compounds in it. It can be red or white. If it's red vermouth, it's more likely to be sweet. It doesn't keep that long. Like a bottle of whiskey, once you open it, as long as it's sealed, it will essentially keep forever. Tequila famously keeps forever. Vermouth does not. It should be kept refrigerated once it's opened and drunk within 6 weeks for best quality. It can be drunk or consumed straight up. I don't know why you would. Or mixed, and most famously, it is mixed into a martini. All right, so now I'm going to jump and I'm going to talk about fortified wines. Now, I like that. It's funny, the idea of fortified wines are all the same. You'll see a certain historical commonality in them, in the way that why they exist. But what a fortified wine is you have a wine, a fermented fruit drink, and you add some distilled spirits. So you add some whiskey, you add some brandy to it. That's what a fortified wine is. It's wine with more alcohol added.
I mean, what goes better with my alcohol then more alcohol.
More alcohol. Now, I had said earlier there are two kinds of fortified wines.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about here is sherry, Madeira, Marsala, those port. Those are fortified wines. Those are the nice ones.
Yeah.
But Nitrain and Mad Dog and Four Roses, those are also fortified wines, which are fruit-based drinks that they've added more liquor to make them stronger.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about the ND 2020 or Nitrain. I'm talking about sherry and port and Madeira. So sherry. We'll start with the name sherry.
Yeah.
Sherry is named for a place. It's in Spain. It's on the Mediterranean coast. And you can go through here, and at least as far back as 1100 BCs, the Phoenicians called the place Shera. And the Romans called it Xere, the Moors Xerez, the Spanish Jerez, the English Sherry. It's the name for the place. This place has been making alcohol for thousands of years and has been famous for it.
Yeah.
Only wine from Jerez in Spain can be called sherry. So this is one of those things that you can't. It doesn't come from there. It's
same thing as champagne. Yeah.
So sherry production is pretty neat. The grapes are pressed, and about 85% of the grapes go to make sherry, and about 15% of the grapes are used to make brandy. And so the fruit juice, the grape juice, the must, as it's called, is fermented to about 13% alcohol. Then, you'll see this sentence here. It says it's racked on the lees. Lees. The lees are the dead yeast. So what they're saying is they don't filter it. They let it sit with the yeast in there, and that gives it a distinct flavor that a lot of alcohol production uses this process of letting it sit with the lees. So the lees are the dead yeast. So it's fermented up to about 13%. Then it's put in barrels, but the barrels are not filled all the way up. They're filled like halfway.
Yeah.
And then they are arranged so that they have a spout on them.
Yeah.
They have a spout on the bottom and a spout on the top. So you can let wine out the bottom, and you can allow wine to come in on the top. Okay? Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Spouts. And then, so I said, part of the grapes are used to make brandy. Well, that brandy is then aged, or the brandy is added to the wine, and they allow it to sit in a barrel for at least a year. And it says it's allowed to do it under floor. And floor is actually a bloom of yeast and stuff that forms on the top. It's like a crust so it's allowed to sit there. And the more that's on there, the better. That's actually used as a quality indicator. So more floor is better. So the gradings are Fino, Amontillado, and Olorosa. And this has to do with how funky it gets, basically.
Yeah, how low can you go?
And so, okay, got a question?
No, it's interesting that, so how did they measure, or who, is there like a body that comes and decides, like, they measure how much floor there is?
Like a sherry inspector general of Spain.
Or is it kind of like we take your word for it type thing?
I'm sure this is inspected.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's part of the process of making sherry. But now this is where it gets interesting. This is the thing that makes sherry sherry. So they're in the barrels that have these two spouts, one on the top, one on the bottom. Yeah. And they're arranged in racks. So if you can imagine, there may be 30 barrels from the top to the bottom. So this is called a solera. And so the top, that barrel can empty into the barrel beneath it. And that barrel can empty into the barrel beneath that. And that barrel can empty into the barrel beneath that. And so on and so on. All the way to the bottom barrel. So imagine if I start at the bottom barrel and I take out one bottle and set it aside. Well, now that barrel is missing a bottle. So what they do is they go to the barrel above it and they let out a gallon to fill up what's missing. And now that second barrel is missing a gallon. So they go to the one above that, open it, pour that into that one. Then they go to the one above that and pour that in. So they pour it. And then when you get to the top, they add fresh wine. So they add the fresh, right out of the barrel stuff to the top. So the stuff at the top is young. The stuff at the bottom is old. And not only is it old, but it's got all those different generations blended together.
Nice.
So what the sherry is it's called fractional blending. But when you get that bottle in, it may be 1% brand new wine and 99% older wine, but it's this blend of all these years of sherry production together, and it's continuous. So the scale never stops. It's like every year you take some out the bottom, you add fresh to the top, and then it mixes through this process. So the rows are scales, and to this blending process that the sherry maker does is called playing the scales. And the idea is that the older wine educates the younger wine. It like brings it along and helps it develop in what it's supposed to be. So in this process, no more than 33% can be removed at any one time. So all the time, it's mostly old wine that's in there. And then a little bit new is added, and then you take some of that off and pour it in the next one. And does that make sense?
So yeah, I wonder if there's like a time frame in between, like
there
how
is.
long? Yeah.
Yeah, and so it has to spend at least 3 years in the barrel.
Okay.
So it's like there's a time frame of how long, but it's hard to say exactly what it is because like I said, they've been making sherry there since there are some scales have been in existence for 3,000 years. So theoretically, there is still some 3,000-year-old wine mixed in there.
That's pretty neat. It'd be kind of cool to see.
It's a really interesting idea. Now, because these barrels aren't tightly sealed and you're mixing them constantly, it's an expensive process because about 10% is lost to evaporation.
Yeah.
Just the angel's share, as it's called, it's gone into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And then when they come out the bottom, the different sets, like I've got some sherry over here, I've got some sherry over here, I've got some sherry over here. I blend them together to get the flavor and the sweetness that I want. So fino or fine sherry, Amontillado sherry is the best for cooking. This is dry sherry. Oloroso is semi-sweet. And then cream sherry is actually sherry that has been blended with very sweet wine, with the wine made from raisins.
Yeah.
So the cream sherry is a very, very sweet sherry. The sweetest sherry is Pedro Jimenez. So if you see a bottle of Pedro Jimenez, one, this is high quality. Two, it's coming from a place that's been doing a long time, and it's probably very sweet. So sherry, you store it like you would store wine, as far as protecting it, laying it on its side so that
the cork doesn't
dry out, vibration free, dark environment. Sherry doesn't age. Like once it's in the bottle, I mean, like I said, it may be 3,000-year-old wine that's moving through these casks. Once you put it in the bottle, it doesn't age. It doesn't get better. And then the fino and the Amontillado should be served chilled. Okay. All right. Another fortified wine, port. And I like port. Port is delicious. You ever had any?
I have in Portugal.
No.
Yeah.
Now, port is...
I know. Fancy.
Yeah, very sweet. I've got a sort of funny port story.
Yeah.
I used to have a Basset Hound, and fantastic dog. And I had a friend give me a very nice bottle of port one day. Oh. And so one day, I have this bottle of port, and it's a Saturday. I said, you know what I'm going to do? Port, especially good port, it's famous for its combination with blue cheese. I am going to go buy some very expensive blue cheese. So I went and bought some English Stilton blue cheese. And I'm going to have my blue cheese and my port because it's a famous pairing. Sweet, intense, creamy port, sweet or salty, intense, creamy blue cheese. They're a great pairing.
It's a match made in heaven.
It is. So I go to the grocery store and I'm bringing my groceries in, bag at a time, or as many as I can carry, laying them down on the floor and go and get more and go and get more. And finally, I get all the groceries put away and I go to sit down and I'm going to eat my blue cheese and have my glass of port. It's like, where's my cheese? I go look, it's not in the fridge. I go look in the trunk of the car because you don't want super stinky blue cheese sitting in the trunk of the car in South Georgia. It's not there. I can't find it anywhere. Finally, I go in the bedroom, and there, laying on her back, is my dog, just belly full, and next to her is just a slobber-covered cheese wrapper. So apparently when I had set the bag down at some point and went out to get more, she'd run and grab the cheese and ran to the bedroom with it and ate it.
Cheese.
Yeah.
Oh, man. That's an expensive.
It was.
Yeah.
And, Basset hounds don't smell that great before you fill them with stinky cheese.
Oh, yeah, that's not something I would want to clean up after.
Yeah. So yeah.
Anyways, back to port.
So port, it's the official drink of the royal family. So whenever you see the king, the queen, or Prince Charles or whatever, and they're having like official toasts, and this is what they toast with. They toast with port. It's
well, ain't they fancy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So port it's a very high sugar wine. So it's fermented until the sugar reaches about 10%. So port, to start, they ferment it till it's 10% sugar. So if you can imagine, if you had like 10 ounces of port, there's 1 ounce of pure sugar in there. It's just very intensely sweet.
Yeah.
And then they put it in barrels with brandy, and it's about 80% wine, about 20% brandy. What the brandy does is it stops the fermentation because, the higher alcohol, it kills the yeast. Yeah. So it stops fermenting. So now it's frozen at this point with this level of alcohol. And it's pretty high alcohol because you've added brandy. So you're around 20% alcohol. Then they age it. And one of the things you'll see why all of these things have in common, the port, the Madeira, and the Marsala, is that they've been done so that the wine could ship. So port comes from Porto in Portugal. And the problem is, well, if we ship our wine, it's being jostled around. That's bad for wine. It's getting hot in the hold of the ship. The ships at this time, no air conditioning, like that. The holds will get to 120 to 140 degrees. So that'd cook the wine. Doesn't taste good. No. So what they found was, wait, if we take this wine and keep a lot of sugar in it, because the sugar will help preserve it, and then we pour alcohol, more brandy in it, and it stops the process. Wow, this stuff is shelf stable.
Yeah.
So basically, port is just a way to make their wine shippable. That was the idea.
Happy accident.
Yeah, so port is, how do we make the wine shippable? And it's great cold weather stuff, because it's really high in alcohol. Before you serve it, you should probably let the bottle stand upright rather than store it on its side, so that port is very intense, has a lot of sediment in it often, so that'll allow the sediment to move to the bottom. You open it, you let it breathe for a little bit, and then consume it. And if it's an old port, a vintage, it's one of those things that once it's exposed to air and oxidizes, it starts going bad. So especially with the vintage port, drink it as fat. Have friends over, have your port, enjoy it. Don't try and store it and portion it out. Okay, different types of port. White port is drier. It's given a little more fermentation time, so more of the sugar is consumed. Ruby port is the youngest. Has to be aged on wood for at least 3 years. Tawny port has been aged from long barreling at least 6 to 8 years. And like anything that's held in a barrel for a long time, it becomes smoother. So tawny port is very smooth. But you can get port that they will age it for 10, 20, 30-year ports. Port ages well in this process, being held in the barrels, and it improves. The best are the late bottled, or the best are the vintage ports. And not every year produces really good port. It's just like wine.
Yeah.
But when they have one, they will declare it a vintage year. Yeah. And then you can have a vintage port. Okay, so enough about port. Now we'll talk about Madeira.
All this talk about booze has gotten me thirsty.
Madeira, just like, Madeira is another city in Spain. And again, it's kind of created to find a way to ship, or because of shipping. So Madeira, they've grown their wine, and they add 96 proof brandy to it to bring it up to around 20% alcohol. Once you add the brandy to it, it stops the fermentation.
Yeah.
Then they keep it at between 104 and 120 degrees for 6 months.
Oofta.
So here's what they're doing. They're cooking it.
Yeah.
So when you cook something, it changes the flavor,
Yeah.
right? So what they found is they added the brandy, they heat it up, and it changes the flavor. It gives it this distinctly Madeira. It's called Madeirized. It gives us this distinct flavor to it. And this process is called estifugum. I doubt I'm pronouncing that right.
Well, I mean, why should we start pronouncing things correctly now?
Estifugum. So anyhow, this is the process of cooking or of aging Madeira under these hot conditions. And so again, it's the same that at the time when they ship wine by boat, the hold got up to this 120, 130 degrees. They discovered, well, if we cook the wine with brandy in it, it actually tastes better. And this shipping process actually makes it better tasting. Huh. And so again, it was a way to make their products portable. Yeah. So
20 years to become vintage.
Yeah, 20 years in a barrel, and 2 years in a bottle. So this is a
to find a vintage Madeira is pretty much like finding diamond in the rough.
Yeah, because again, the conditions are different every year, and I mean it's always good, but every now and then you get this special set of conditions, and they'll declare a vintage year. Sometimes Madeira will go through the sherry process of going through the Solera and be blended. Those are very rare, very expensive. I have never seen or had one, but they exist.
Yeah, to find one of those out in the wild is unique.
Yeah. But Madeira, this process of adding the brandy and cooking it, essentially, this is like whiskey. It lasts forever. This is the longest lived wine. There's no other wines that are like this. It'll last, and to give you some idea, it'll last 6 weeks after it's open. Most wine, you have 2 or 3 days. Madeira, 6 weeks after you open it, the quality's still good. And actually, they encourage, because it's already been, the cooking process oxidizes it, which is what you're usually trying to avoid in wine, not in Madeira. So it's often recommended you open it, you let it stand for a day before you even serve it. Let it breathe.
Yeah, that's definitely not how normally you treat a wine.
No, not at all. It's very different. And now Marsala. So Marsala is you're blending 3 different things together that are all wine products to create this wine, fortified wine. And so you're mixing what's called Cotto, Sifone, and brandy. The Cotto is wine. It's been aged, so this is wine. And then you put it in imagine put it in a pot and you cook it till it's concentrated. So you've cooked it to you take a bottle and you cook it down till it's only 1/3 of its original volume.
Oof, that's rich.
Yeah, so now this is very intense. And then Sifone is a blend of brandy and semi-sweet wine. So now you take this cooked wine and you mix it with more brandy and more semi-sweet wine and more brandy, and you get Marsala. Then you let it age in a barrel for a couple years.
Damn.
And so the gradings here are based on sweetness. So Secco, which means dry, which means less sugar, has 4% residual sugar, which is still pretty high. Semi-Secco, 4 to 10% residual sugar. Dolce, more than 10% sugar. That's very sweet. Yeah. If you serve a dry Madeira, you want to serve it at room temperature, or that should be Marsala. Well, should say Marsala. And it can last up to 6 weeks. So again, but this was one of those that was created because it allowed it to be shipped. Like our wine goes bad in the hold of a boat. What can we do so that we can ship it and sell it in another country? Well, let's mix it with some brandy.
Yeah.
So fortified wines are kind of interesting.
They are. They are. I didn't realize it was all because of shipping. Kind of
Yeah,
neat.
pretty much.
And
All
it's
right,
a
well,
great excuse to have another beverage. So
exactly. Let's go pour ourselves a glass of port.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, Dr. Robertson. I hope the students had a good time. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.